Thanks, Marcel. Yeah. Yeah, so that was all the low-code side of things. And of course, remember, what we're trying to do is trying to make following software development best practices easier. This is the key. This is where this investment is. But remember, you still have choices to make at this point in time. So, and one of those choices is, if you're looking at this Git and native Git integration versus using the Pack CLI, the Power Apps command line interface, is that whether or not you have code-first components is quite a big important decision, right? So deciding to use pro-code components has many different aspects to it. Obviously, you're going to have to maintain that code, but also it will affect how you do source code at this time. And so if you're going to do any C#, TypeScript, source code builds from source control, then you're going to have to use a slightly different approach to what we've just seen. This should be on the screen. There we go. Yep, perfect. So this slide here, you can take a picture of it. Except for, let's bring it back up again. You can take a picture of this. This compares the native Git integration with the Pack CLI and gives you some of those choices that you're going to have to make. And we're going to see some of these things in action. So we're going to look at C#, TypeScript source code builds. We're going to look at doing partial commits. That is, rather than just simply taking all of the changes from an environment and putting those into Git, actually selecting which changes you actually want to based on the changes that you've done. Obviously, there are some limitations. There's some empty boxes there. So the new YAML support for Canvas that Marcel was showing, that is not currently available in Pack CLI. So,
well, actually, you can get the code which is documented, but is not supported fully on the pipeline.
Not fully supported. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah. So let's take a look at. Hello. Why is this not being responsive? Let's try again. Let's try again. My laptop's not playing. Right, there we go. So we have a solution which is based on there is a JavaScript solution called Contoso Real Estate Architecture. And this is a fully pro-code solution. Okay, so you can go into GitHub and see this. Built by my team, the JavaScript side of things, it uses a whole. Why is this not showing? There we go. There we go. There we go. So this is not working. Really?
Sorry, God's help me, and
there we go.
They let you down.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there we go. So what we did is we took that JavaScript project and we converted it into Power Platform. So we didn't convert all of it, we just converted parts of it to show that you can work with pro code and low code in conjunction. And so if you go to, there is a AKA there, pp/Contoso Real Estate. There's a repo which shows you all of those different components. But there is also a workshop that goes with it. And if those of you that were in the workshops yesterday will have seen some of that as well. And so what we're allowing us to do is to take that source code, which is the low code, as well as TypeScript and C#, we can build from source code, we can create a solution, and then we can deploy it. And that means that enables us not only to use the software engineering best practices to be able to see what changes we're making, so we know what is in our deployment. So when we deploy it, we're not just simply pressing that button and hoping for the best. We know exactly what has changed. And then it also allows us to run a continuous integration and deployment. So we want everything to be as code. And this is the really most important part of this, is that all of the metadata from Dataverse, the Power Automate flows, Power Pages, model-driven apps, all of those things, as well as all of our C# and TypeScript as well alongside that. So what that means is that we can use the Pack CLI, and I'm going to show how that works, okay? So here is Visual Studio, VS Code, and I have got, based on Scott Hanselman's advice, I've got VS Code pets installed, so I can make a rubber duck there, so I can talk to it to solve all of my problems, and kind of interact with it a little bit. Very important. Make sure that you have that extension in all of your pro code solutions. But if we run a certain number of, if we can run some commands here, so I'm going to create a folder here called update days 25, and then I'm running something called npx create new webpack app. So this is allowing me to create a webpack TypeScript project so I can start to develop my TypeScript code for model-driven apps. I can also go and create another, and in this terminal, I'm going to add another command, which is going to initialize a PCF, a Power Apps Component Framework control. So you'll have seen some of that already. And this allows me to go and add in, for example, some, if we go into model-driven app here, you can see this is a swiper-like control here. This is the stuff that you can't do natively in Power Apps. So you're extending the user interface. And of course, you can extend Canvas apps as well. And I'm going to go and create another window here, another PowerShell window. And I'm going to not only do, we did pack PCF in it, but I'm also doing pack plugin in it. So this is allowing me to extend the back end of Betaverse. And Vivian and Yannick's session earlier was talking about the different extension points. And so if we look now at, go back to our first command, which is still running. But what this will do is it will just create all the boilerplate code for us. So let's look at something that I've already done so that we can actually see how that looks. And this is the result of, if you run those labs, those workshop labs, this is what you will actually end up with. So we've got a set of folders here. So we've got our model-driven app client hooks here. So this is a set of, we can see source, and I've got a TypeScript form here for extending my Contoso real estate application. And I've also got some tests as well. So let's bring this down here. So you can see here, here's all my TypeScript, which gets compiled into JavaScript. And I've got some tests, so I can run some unit tests of my TypeScript as well, put breakpoints, etc. I've also got my PCF as well. So this is what it was created as when I ran my pack PCF in it. So I've gone and added in my React code here, which is using a component called Swiper for that swiping left, right. And so all this code is available in those repos. You can go and check it out. And we've also got our plugin code as well here. So we've got some our plugins. So if we go in and look at this, this is an onCreate plugin, which does some validation of our reservations. So all of these things are included now in source. So what we've got is we can now get the ability to actually go and commit that into source control. But what about all of the other things? Because remember I said everything as code, okay? Well, what we want to be able to do is we want to also be able to take the solution down and from Power Platform and also source control that. And this is the equivalent of when Marcel showed actually adding that using the native Git. Well, and the way we do that, rather than going into the Power Apps and just simply committing it directly using the native Git, we would say pack solution clone. Okay? And what this does is this, you give it the name of that solution, and it brings down, and then it will unpack it into this folder here. So what we end up with is all of the different parts of our solution. So we've got our model-driven apps in here, we've got our bots, we've got Canvas apps, we've got entities, so we can see all of this. Now, remember I was talking about modern software development and the practices. What that means is that when I want to see what we are deploying in our next release, and because we're going to look at CI/CD in a minute, then it means that we'll be able to very clearly see in our particular pull request or our commits exactly what has changed. And of course, what that means is that what we need to do is we need to do a sync, right? We need to be able to then, every time I make a change, so if I go into in the Maker portal and I make a change, I add in another entity, I add in another table, I want to actually resync that solution to see my change set. But what about the deployments as well? Well, because I've now got all of this inside my folder structure here and my solution, there is another folder, another file in here called, it's a CDS proj, and the CDS proj has got some references. So we have got a reference to our PCF, we've got a reference to our model-driven app TypeScript in here, and we've got a reference to our plugin. So what this enables me to do is say simply, if I go into my solution and go into my workshop, like this, I can just simply say .NET build. And I could say that it is going to be done the release build. And what that means is that it's going to minify my TypeScript. It's going to prep that for production. It's going to minimize and optimize my PCF code. And it's also going to create a release build of my plugin. And because I've added in my references, it's also then going to take those outputs from my code, and it's going to combine those with my source control of my solution, the low-code elements. And so if we look at, for example, the plugin assemblies here, in this folder, we have the metadata about our plugin registration. Okay? So this is saying that there's a plugin here that's registered. This is its friendly name. But we also have got the message steps as well. So this is the registration of that particular plugin with a SDK step. But what it doesn't have the DLL. Very important. It doesn't have the actual assembly that's compiled, because what's happening is when I do the .NET build, the output from the build of the C# is going to be combined into my solution so that it can then be referenced. And exactly the same goes for web resources. If I come into my web resources here, under my web resource for our model-driven apps JavaScript, we've got the metadata about the JavaScript. We don't actually have the JavaScript, the output of that TypeScript. So the .NET build is combining our pro code and our low code and creating a solution that can be deployed. And this is very important because this enables us to do automatic builds when we actually want to do a CI, continuous integration, continuous deployment. Because we know every time we do that automatic build and automated deployment, it's always going to use the latest code, our C# code, and the latest TypeScript code. And this is what we're talking about software development best practices, because we're never going to get into a situation whereby we've got something out of sync. We're going to maybe got a JavaScript deployed to our environment that's out of sync with the code that we have in source control. Or we've got a plugin assembly that's deployed that's out of sync with the actual C#. So that means that when I have a pull request and I see that somebody's made a change to some TypeScript or they've made a change to C#, we know, we have the confidence that when we do that automated build, that change that we're seeing in the pull request is going to be reflected in that deployment. So we can see that it's now it's succeeded. So if I go over to my folders here, and I open up the output of this, which will be in the bin folder, and I say reveal in File Explorer, and then if I open the actual package here that it's created me a zip. So if I open that zip, which is the folder, the zip that's actually going to be deployed to our environment, if I come into plugin assemblies, for example, remember before we only had the metadata. Well, what we've now got is we've actually got the assembly. That's just been built from my source code. Equally, if I go back and go into my web resources and look at the web resources that are available, we've got some SVGs, but also we've got a client hooks.js. And so that means that if we look at that, what it means is that we will be able to see that that has got the JavaScript that's been output from my build that I ran inside my .NET build. So what we're doing here is we're creating best practices for software development. All right, if we go back to our demo here. Now, this is end of part 1.
Yes, and that's, you see, we have different levels of abstraction. Like there's the CDS project, there's the solution. That's why it can get confused, but as Scott showing, like, it's actually pretty simple, right? So please, if use this form here to give feedback to us. I would love to hear what you think, and that's the end of part 1.
Yeah, so we're moving on to part 2. Because really, on the agenda, when we saw source code control and CI/CD, they're really two sides of the same coin. You can't actually separate them because it's the same best practice. It's that ability to be able to know exactly what you're deploying, knowing which changes have been made, so that when I press that button to deploy, I have confidence that it's repeatable. It's always going to do the same thing. I should be able to have the confidence to say, press deploy, or in fact, ask someone else to press deploy. You see where this is going? So, Marcel, low code.
Yes, so low code. So that's the thing, right? CI/CD, if you say that to a citizen developer, they will not get interested. That's why I like so much the pipelines in Power Platform, because it shows it really, and also it will take the user there. So if you go to the Maker portal and try to import a solution, you will see that, hey, don't you want to publish? Because publish, that's what it is, right? And this table, I think, is one of the best things that we got from this, from this session. If you are a citizen developer, always try to use Power Platform pipelines. If you have a build process where you need to compile or things like that, that's time to start to use DevTools. Sometimes you can call custom stuff, but ask a pro developer for help. Okay, start with pipelines. When it gets spicy, ask for a pro developer.
Get spicy.
Yes.
But
talking about spicy, I think we want to do a spicy thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, though, like on this first column, pipelines for Power Platform, it's also got pro dev, right?
Yes.
So it's not just a maker. Pipelines are useful for both pro dev scenarios as well as makers.
And the good thing about pipelines, which we will see here on the screen, it shows the version, it shows the history, how many deployments have you done, what happened. It is really is really great for citizen developers because they don't need to leave Maker portal. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do we want to do here?
This is what are we going to do here? So this is Powerful Devs Conference, which is next week. So please do tune in. There's going to be really some awesome stuff. There's a website, powerfuldevs.com, and it's built using Power Pages. Power Pages is literally the most pro-dev part of Power Platform because you're writing JavaScript and HTML and CSS. So it's a pro-dev platform, and we can deploy it using pipelines. So, Marcel, do you want to show?
This is actually the live website, right?
Yeah, this is actually this is so you can just click deploy, because I could just go home at this point. That's how confident I am.
Are you sure I cannot break this?
No, you can't break this. Well, I mean, you could. You probably could.
So I can see the last time you deployed, it was in the 17th of Jan, 19 days ago. If I click here, this will update the live website.
Well, they'll ask you for a few extra pieces of information. But yeah, click it. Yeah, go on, click it. Go on, click it. You know you want to.
All right. So let's select the. I want to do now.
Yes,
not later.
Yeah.
Are you saying that I will have to type what it will do?
You might have to.
Oh.
Let's just wait to see what happens. But it's if anyone does want to go to the Powerful Devs website, there is a reference to Sandra Bullock and the Net, the film. You might be able to find it on the homepage. I'll leave that up to you. But I got an email this morning when I woke up, which was telling me that I'd done something that was not accessible. Because for all Microsoft products, all websites, public websites, you have to be very, very conscious of accessibility. And there's a scan, and it's brilliant that it scans it and tells you about anything that's broken. So,
who did that for me?
Well, it's AI again. We're talking AI, yeah.
I thought we were done on AI.
So yeah, I just had to do a little tweak to make it. Has anyone found the reference to the net on Powerful Devs? Anyone? No. Okay. Anyway, click deploy. Yeah, and then
Okay.
good to go. Yeah, that will then. Yeah, there we go. Currently deploying version. Thank you.
I think we can check later.
Yeah, we'll check later on to see if that works. We'll come back to see.
I feel a pro dev now.
But of course, although that's Power Pages and that's using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all those kind of cool stuff, what that's doing is it's exporting it from my development environment. It's exporting the solution as a managed solution, and then it's going to deploy that into my production environment, and that's why it's so slick. And you can also do things like set environment variables and all of those kind of things. But what about if you have pro code components such as we saw earlier, like TypeScript, like C#? We have to have an additional bit of a stage in between that where we have to do the build and package. And so if you want to use pipelines in Power Platform, then you're going to have a step before that. But of course, if you're using automated builds inside Azure DevOps or in GitHub, well, the likelihood is you're already handling all of that kind of pro dev stuff. So you probably are going to want to just say, well, I can just deploy it as well using the release side of things as well. And so typically, this is the Composer Real Estate project. Typically, if you've got a Power Apps component framework, PCF component, which is built using TypeScript, you deploy that to Power Pages, Power Apps for Canvas apps or model-driven apps. Or in the Composer Real Estate, there's also a custom connector as well. So you're going to have maybe some special things you need to do for the custom connector in linking it to Azure and deploying Azure resources. Equally, if you've got a virtual table, for example, that uses managed identities and virtual networks to connect over to Azure functions, you're probably going to have some additional things you need to do that. So there are lots and lots of these additional steps that you need to put in, which quite often are very easy to do in PowerShell, right? So everything is code, including your deployment scripts. Now, if we're using Power Platform to deploy, then a lot of those PowerShell scripts are handled for us, right? Because if you're doing pro dev stuff, if you're writing deployments of SQL Server or something, you're going to have to write loads of scripts. You know, it's like if anyone's done that kind of development, it's like scripts to deploy a certain version to upgrade to the next version, so many manual things. We get a load of that done for us. So it's not like we're going right back to first principles. We're already getting a whole load of that hard work done for us by the platform. So we're just sort of doing those slightly additional steps. But the key is that we're getting all of those all of that development environment, like we saw with the source code, syncing between the solution when we've made a change and seeing that in source code. And then we're going to, again, check that in, and that could then go and trigger an automatic build. So if I create a pull request, I can then actually trigger an automatic build to validate that my code is all building. So before we actually get to the point where we are putting it into a release pipeline or a release branch, we want to validate that everything is actually okay and nothing is broken. So we're creating protection. We're protecting our branch, and so that making sure that code will actually be able to deploy. So, and the other thing is that we're not exporting a solution like the pipeline, so Power Platform is doing. We're taking source code as our golden source of truth. We're not taking a special environment. People talk about cattle vs pets of environments. Like, we don't want to have a special environment that we stroke and we look after. It's not very vegan friendly. A colleague of mine, Eliza, she's vegan, so she always gets at me for talking about cattle vs pets. So if anyone can come up with a vegetable-related analogy, that would be great afterwards. But the point is that the entirety of our solution is represented in source control, so we can take the entire thing. So that means that when we look at a pull request, when we look at those diffs, we know that that is what's going to be deployed, not something that has accidentally been added by somebody, not some test table or some view that somebody's added or someone's changed a form because they were doing some debug. Like the classic one is you've got a locked field and somebody unlocks it because they want to go and edit it, and they forget to relock it. And I've been in this situation lots. I've done it myself. But when you have your source control as that single point of truth, you can see those changes, and so you know exactly what is being deployed. So there is also a consideration for mono repos versus a single repo. And what do I mean? So firstly, Paves was doing a great job of talking about segmenting. Well, sometimes you have multiple solutions, right? Sometimes you have to. For example, you might want to segment by business function, but the key is you want to avoid circular dependencies. That's the most important. So in this case, we've got the event management and the real estate modules solutions taking dependency on the core. Of course, each of those needs their own environments to be able to work on them. And of course, that means you're going to have a separate source for those solutions. Because remember, we sync a solution to a folder. So every time you have a new solution, you're going to have a separate folder for that source, which means you're going to have a separate .NET build for that solution source. You could also segment by component type. So this gets more complicated, but it is achievable. But again, you need to avoid circular references. It's the most important thing. But a hybrid solution, and this is what Contosa Real Estate project does, where it says, okay, we've got a portal solution that is taking dependency on the core, but then we've also got this custom controls, which is actually built entirely from source. So the custom controls, the PCF solution, doesn't actually need a developer environment because it's only code. And so this is great because we can then, the fact that we're building it from code, it works very well for that. And so a monorepo versus a multi-repo, polyrepo, you might call it. In this case, we've got multiple source code repos for our Azure API, for our custom controls, for our core solution and portal. Well, actually, a lot of the time it's easier just to have a single, because what this means is that you're going to have a single place to go for all your chain sets. You can have a pull request, which actually will span all of the solutions. So if you're deploying multiple solutions together, it allows you to be able to see the changes across all of them. And what that means is that you can then have a branching strategy as well, which allows you to version across all of your solutions. So you might say, well, you've got a protected branch, so no one can make changes to that branch. But then you might say, well, I start work on a particular feature, and so I create a new environment for that. And I have a branch in my source control for that. And so I start working, I add some columns, and et cetera. But then somebody might say, well, actually, I'm working on feature 2. And we know feature 2 is going to be deployed at a much later date. We're not going to deploy it at the same time. So we want to isolate the changes. Now, in sort of pure software development terms, we'd have some flags, some feature flags, right, that would protect. But in Power Platform, there are some things you just can't put behind a feature flag. If I'm adding a new table, I can't put that behind a feature flag. I can't disable that code when I'm deploying. So I have to have a separate environment to sync to that source code, to keep the two separately. I might have a hotfix as well. So again, a separate environment for that hotfix to make sure that I'm not going to accidentally deploy some of the work that I'm working on feature 1 and feature 2. And then we start to have this issue about merging. So we want to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take my hotfix and I'm going to merge it into my release branch, but I'm also going to merge it back into feature 2. And that poses some challenges. But if you look at the source code, it's very tempting to just say, oh, well, I'll just merge it at the source code level. I'll go and take that bit of XML on that bit of YAML. I would say that most of the time what you want to do is you want to use the Power Platform tools in order to do that, by exporting little bits of your solution and maybe manually adding. If you've both worked on the same component, the reality is you're probably going to need to work together. Or even better, if you know that you're working on the same component, even better, just use the collaborative tools in Power Platform. Use co-authoring. Work on it in a single environment. If you know that you're editing the same app, it's probably not a good idea to have parallel branching, unless you absolutely have to, unless it's like an emergency hotfix. So minimize the times that you need to do this. But it's a reality. We do need to think about it. And then, of course, we might then want to have a second release which merges both of our features in and then deploys that to our branch. So you have choices. You have choices. Either you can handle it by co-authoring, by consolidating your effort into a single environment and working on that and syncing that source code, but then where you need to, maybe then for hotfixes or very long-running projects that you want to isolate, a parallel branch is going to be the answer. So what that means is then your build pipeline will be able to do your Azure build because it's all in the same repo. You can build your Azure code. You can use Bicep to create deployment scripts for that. You can then build multiple solutions. So in the Contoso real estate sample repo, if you go there, you can see what it has. Is it has a config that says, right, these are my different solutions, and this is where they exist in my repo. It's, for example, here, the custom controls is under source controls. The core is under source core. Portal to source portal. And what that means is when you're doing versioning, right, you can then only rev the version when there is a change. So you can say, has there been any commits to that folder? If there has been some commits, then I'm going to increment the version. If I haven't revved that, if I haven't made any changes, then you don't need to. You don't even need to actually deploy an update, right? Because it will be skipped when you actually deploy it. So this is one of the advantages. So what you end up with is a set version. If it's changed, you determine if it has changed. You then have to then set the version on your XML, your solution XML, the version of your solution XML that's been unpacked. Plugin assembly, set those versions. PCF manifests, you can set those. Web resources. Sometimes you want to be able to show a version number in your web resource. So it's a good idea to be able to set that as well. And then you can do your .NET build. So you can build your TypeScript, like I showed. .NET build with a CDS proj, add those references. It's automatically going to do your TypeScript builds. And if it's a production build, it will minimize it. And linting to make sure that it's all consistent with your standards that you've taken. And if you do the labs, make sure you go and look at those labs. It gives you all of the information on how to do all of this stuff. C#, it will do your .NET build for C# as well, and then it will pack those things into a zip, which then can be, you can then run tests on this as well. So you can run tests on your plugins. You can also run solution checker to make sure it's consistent with all all the best practices. You could even then use package deployer to if you're going to deploy this into app source. Or use configure the packaging for deploying it to the Power Platform catalog manager. And then, of course, what you end up with there is a set of artifacts. And those artifacts then are going to be the input to your release, right? Because this is build. This build can run every single time you have a change request. And you create a pull request, or if you do a commit. So this is what an automatic build might look like, and this is actually in GitHub, sorry. You can use the Power Platform tools in both GitHub as well as in Azure DevOps. Again, if you look at the Contoso real estate sample, it has an example. It's using GitHub just simply to allow you to do it easily. You can simply fork that repo, and there are instructions on how to set all this stuff up. But you can see there's 3 separate steps. There's the steps for each of those individual solutions. But what it will do is it will check. So you can see here that it's checking if there are any changes. And it only then going and doing a build if those changes have been in place. So it's authorizing with the pack CLI, and then it's doing the solution check, and then it's publishing the artifacts. But then what it means is you can then put that into the deployment. And so you can have staged deployment. So you take that output from that build, from the .NET build, when you end up with a solution or a packaged solution, and then you can then say, right, I'm going to deploy that into my release stabilization environment. And I find release stabilization environments very, very powerful because you want to know that what you've just packed is actually something that's really actually valid. So you can have that place. This is before it even gets into test. You want to stabilize it. Now, if you wanted to, you could then use pipelines for Power Platform on the back of that, if you wanted to. You've deployed to an environment from your automated build process, and now you could then press that button that Marcel just pressed to then move it to subsequent environments if you wanted to. But if you wanted to, you could also use the same tools to deploy into your testing, your QA, and then into your production. On that release stabilization environment, what that also enables you to do is to do integration tests as well as any automated UI tests as well. Now, if you come to the Powerful Devs conference next week, there is a really great session on how to do automated testing and user interface testing. And so in the deployment pipeline inside the Contoso real estate, you'll see just that. You'll see how it will then deploy. And not only is it deploying the solutions, but it's also doing some additional steps as well. It's doing some downloading the release artifacts. It's doing things like setting environment variables using the deployment settings. So it's also wiring up connection references. But it's also doing some little kind of monkey patching, if you like. It's injecting some config into the solution, because there's some things that can't be set during using the configuration of deployment. And so what the deployment pipeline does is it actually injects some things into that zip before it actually deploys it. For example, the managed identity ID, or if you've got configuration that needs to be put into Power Pages, like the auth settings, or URLs for certain other services that it's using, you can inject those into the zip, you unzip it, update it, rezip it, and then you can deploy it. And then when you import it, you can then, as Pavel was talking about earlier, doing update or upgrade. And then, of course, what you can do is you can import data as well. So this goes back to that mantra of everything as code, because you can put all your reference data into source code as well. And so that means that every time a pull request comes in, and you can see, OK, I've updated this feature, and this feature, you might also have an update to the data that's required for those features. And so you can see that in source code. And this is incredibly powerful, I found, when you're deploying. Then there's additional post-deployment steps, such as sharing, maybe some manual steps that you might need to do, for example, fixing up the Power Pages flows. Some of these things only need to be done once, and some of them need to be done if you change anything. And so in the Contoso real estate, go and check it out. You can see all of these things in action. So you have choices to make, is the theme for today.
Yes, and that's the point. Like, there's no right or wrong solution. You have options. As a pro developer, that's your role. But also, let's be careful that we can empower the maker. And keep them safe and productive so they can really focus on the right challenges. They know business knowledge. That is valuable. The more we let them to concentrate on that, better requirements we will get, less ambiguous, and we'll be able to deliver things better, right? We have another form if you want to give feedback, please. I would appreciate that. We would all appreciate that.
This QR code, if you follow this will take you to a form where you can pass on feedback to the Microsoft product team, right? So this is your opportunity. So I don't want anyone coming to me saying, no one listens to me. Right here, right now. This is your opportunity. But we can open to questions. If anyone has any questions on any of the things we've talked about, I know we've talked about a lot, but we'll also be around all day as well, so you can kind of come to us in the corridor.